This is the third chakra, Manipura, and how it affects the human psyche, possibly shifting the narrative of how we look at mental health today, or at least address it. The Manipura is the home of I CANT, identity. It looks like anxiety when blocked. It's the home of imagination. Let's break this down a little bit. The home of I CANT, the ability to move forward to what it is that you want to do, that you have a dream and you want to fulfill the dream, sounds good, but you can't actually move towards the I CANT without a solid I am, solid roots in knowing who you are. It is very likely that all of us experience trauma. At a young age, without being able to answer the question, who am I, when the question arises, the best thing that we do is we take inspiration from our environment, the people around us, the descriptors they've used to describe us. So when somebody said that you're greedy, or you're fat, or you're lazy, you are not those things. That is not you, but without being able to answer the question at the time, you would have taken these descriptors, whether negative or positive, and used them to become a truth of who you are. You think you are. This then became your lie. It's very similar to how we discussed that what trauma is. You explaining to yourself as best as you could at the time what had happened without somebody else explaining to you, and this lie then became your truth. That became a repeating cycle. But you've grown and you've answered the question, who am I? You've set good solid roots into the home of I am. Now we go into the realm of I can, imagination of every possible reality. But what happens with trauma? When we have the past two chakras as layers, the Muladhara fear, where you are is not safe, survival. Svadhisthana on top of it, shame and guilt. Who I am is not good, is not enough. When you have these fear-based and shame or guilt-based thoughts repeated in your mind, imagination, like when we were kids, no longer becomes what it is supposed to be, a blessing. It becomes more of a burden, a repeating cycle in your mind. If anxiety is chronic worry, and worry is praying for the worst possible outcome, we could see why a blocked Manipura is a bad thing. Anxiety is literally you wishing on the worst possible outcome, because that's what you feed in your mind over and over again. In a state of who you naturally are, at your base is peace and calm. But imagination can be the worst nightmare of peace and calm. It's the exact opposite, in fact. How does imagination form within us? When we take in a certain amount of knowledge and it exceeds who we are, it becomes imagination. It festers because we don't use the knowledge we've taken in and apply it to change our being. The correct statement here would be, when knowledge exceeds understanding, it becomes imagination. And you can only get to understanding after having transformed from being. Taking the knowledge, applying it to being, it becomes understanding. The thing with trauma and the human psyche is, as bad as it is, the law of imagination states that we will always think of the worst possible outcome of any situation. This ties back into what we just talked about with the layering of the chakra traumas and how it affects the third one. But you've balanced your first chakra and you balance your second chakra. Now to balance your third chakra, I would always advise going back to the root of it and looking at the memory of how it happened and then seeing it from a different perspective. But something you can do to just bring yourself a bit more aware of it. Who am I when nothing is in my control? Or when nothing is in control of how I want it to be, who do I become? This is where you see the truth of your identity, the parts of yourself that you likely don't want to see. Be very honest with yourself and ask yourself, what is your control pattern? See, this is your favorite tool when things are out of control. This could look like an addiction. It could look like unconsciously just eating a lot of food. At the end of the day, worry is a whole series of lies that you tell yourself at its root. So you need to ask yourself and be very honest with yourself when you address this core repeating pattern. Is this true? And if you still say yes, ask yourself, do you know for sure that this is true? Emphasis on no. This is one way in which you can address this, but my favorite way would be to leverage imagination. When we think of the best possible outcome, we have to work at it. We have to actively think of the best possible outcome. You see, we already got the negative one neatly wrapped up in a cool, nice package with a bow on top. But what happens when we swing the pendulum all the way to the extreme opposite and think of the most positive outcome? The most out of this world, not likely to ever happen outcome in the best way possible. We give ourselves the opportunity to see the extreme opposites. And when we remember that reality falls in the middle of these two things, it calms our anxiety down about the situation that we're worried about. Alright, thanks for watching. I do numerology soul contract readings, which helps one find their purpose in life that's unique to you. I do astrology natal chart readings, which help you figure out more of yourself and fall in love with yourself, as well as an intuitive tarot rune spread for questions that you may have or that you want to answer. Frequency does not lie. Love you. Have a good night.